Hi, this is Danny Ebert. I'm interviewing Dr. Nicole Bowman for the Indigenous Voices project. Nicky, if you could tell me a little about yourself and where you live and the work that you're doing.
Okay, ni de shinzi wichiwa neo kanewak, ni nonjai lanape kwe, mohikanawe kwe. My name is Nicole Bowman. I am Lenape and Mohican woman, and I live in Shawano, Wisconsin, United States of America, which is northeastern Wisconsin. And I own a business called Bowman Performance Consulting. We've been open almost 20 years, and I have a part-time academic appointment at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Both places I do culturally responsive and Indigenous evaluation at the project, organizational, and systems level, and really try to focus on culture, language, community context, and then asserting sovereignty and tribal nationhood within an evaluation design as equal partners to other governments that are involved in the evaluation.
Can you kind of talk about the types of initiatives, services, or programs that are being delivered by or for Indigenous folks?
Well, right now, I've seen throughout North America, I've seen tribal nations partnering with national governments, such as the Canadian Eval Society. There are studies also being done in the United States where environmental efforts are being evaluated, educational outcomes and compacts are being evaluated to see how well our students are doing in K-12 or higher ed systems. I've seen lots of Indigenous nations and Indigenous evaluators providing training and technical assistance to build the capacity of non-tribal governments, nonprofit agencies, and for-profit agencies who are carrying out research, policy, and evaluation studies. And I've also seen more extended workshops and trainings where the evaluator is folded into a week-long or even longer sometimes workshop or coursework certifications to help develop tribal nation leaders, evaluators of color, majority evaluators, so that they are better equipped to have the scientific and technical skills, theories, and methods that are needed to carry out a culturally responsive evaluation with Indigenous people and tribal nations.
So you kind of touched base on who's involved with these initiatives. Are you aware of who's funding these?
Yeah, a lot of the bigger initiatives are funded, at least in the United States, are funded by folks like the Kellogg Foundation. They fund many of our projects. Truth, Healing, Reconciliation project grantees comes to mind. Many of the Kellogg programs that are funded require a culturally responsive and community-based evaluation. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation is very interested and conducts those. They hire Native American firms, individuals, and teams. They're helping build the pipeline, just like Annie Casey Foundation is, and some other folks. I do see evaluations that are funded by the state and the federal government, but more often when those are funded, if you are an Indigenous evaluator and you have a relationship with some of these organizations that tend to win the contracts that are funded by the state or federal agencies, they will bring you into the bid to help write the bid, or after it's awarded, they will bring you in to help provide leadership and capacity building around culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation. So basically, I've seen it funded by many folks, and I've also seen more and more tribal nations and tribal nonprofits funding evaluations as of late, probably within the last 3 to 5 years.
So in general, how do you see local and Indigenous people, how do you think they feel about evaluation?
Well, I think at first, Indigenous people, as with many marginalized populations who aren't part of the dominant culture, there's evidence that their research and evaluation have been used to create assimilation policies or other policies that lead to the demise of, you know, underrepresented populations and Indians, Native Americans, tribal nations in particular. So I think at first they're weary about it, but when you have a multi-ethnic team that comes in there, and especially folks who are not just Native American or American Indian or Indigenous, and I'm speaking more for the global North, but that are traditional and they understand traditional knowledge and they understand traditional and cultural protocols. Plus, they understand the scientific aspects of doing culturally responsive Indigenous evaluation. I think that makes the community feel much better because they lead or they co-lead the evaluation, because then the evaluator comes in as more as facilitator and not the complete leader. And so it's done in a very much a community-based and tribally driven and participatory way. So I think they feel better when they see a mixed team.
So the next question is about an evaluation that has been done really well, and what has worked for local people. I think that last part about community-based participatory kind of covered that. Would you like to add anything else, or?
I just think that of the evaluation, there are many evaluation projects that I've worked on that have gone well, and they've gone well because evaluation wasn't an end thought. The evaluator was brought in right away as a beginning part of the discussion. It was a part of the required procurement process, so whoever was bidding on the project, you know, if you're working with a tribal nation or tribal communities, they say you have to have culturally competent and scientifically competent Indigenous evaluators. I also think that when the good projects have evaluators that sit back and listen, they sit in a circle instead of it being top down or removed. They work with the community. It is culturally based. It is tribally centered. We've either created new instruments or we've modified existing instruments so that they will have culture, language, and community context in it, so that they are appropriate questions. And sometimes an interview instrument might have a different method used. So you use the same questions, but instead of having one-on-one interviews or group interviews, you have a talking circle. And so it becomes a semi-structured instrument in which the evaluator has to have the skills to facilitate that conversation, to cover all the questions, but it's done in a community, sitting in a circle in a community-based setting, so that it doesn't feel as clinical and it feels more natural. And that's that natural sharing with one another, co-constructing is the way, you know, are some of the aspects that help make for a good evaluation. And then, of course, if tribes have their own protections with IRBs, we've used tribal IRBs, or tribes own the data once we're done, or tribes get a say in if the analysis is correct or the types of reports that are made or who they're given to. All of those aspects from the start to the end make for good evaluation projects in my 20-some years of experience.
So are you aware of any documentation about these good evaluation practices and protocols?
Yes, I have a 16-page bibliography. Some of the book chapters or journal articles I have provided either as a formal publication, as a training, or as a keynote. So those are available and could be made available to Eval Indigenous if they have some sort of clearinghouse.
Okay. Has anything changed in your life or your community's life because of evaluation?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I've really grown. The more I learn about traditional culture and language and the practices of all different tribal nations and communities that I've met, especially in North America, but throughout the world, the better I am at it as an evaluator, so that community and cultural base becomes the foundation, and I'm able to have access and see teachings and get things that aren't necessarily always published. And I'm very protective of that, because then when you're working on an evaluation, it has to be flexible and fluid so that it can kind of grow as it's being implemented. Because when we write up an evaluation design, it's on paper, it's theoretical. Once you start implementing it, you see how the community, different stakeholders, or whatever community members in the environment itself either support the evaluation design. If there's challenges or gaps, you have to be able to adjust. So I've really, you know, the more Indigenous evaluation I do, the more comfortable I am, because you kind of start seeing patterns of what's working, what might not be working. You have strategies and skills that you can build upon. You feel more comfortable asking, well, how do you do it here? You know, you have to be unafraid to ask those questions. You can't be the controller of the evaluation, you're the facilitator of it. So I think it's enriched me for sure personally, because I'm learning more about culture, language, and community, and doing evaluations within that context. And then professionally, it's helped me as I have lived experiences with these evaluations. I'm learning by experiential learning, by implementing Indigenous evaluations with Indigenous partners. I can go back to the literature and say, oh, what do we call it in the literature? Oh, is that missing? And it helps me have better conversations with my colleagues in academia, you know, or policymakers, to kind of hopefully help them modify their behaviors and practices.
Okay, thanks for that. Do you think that there's a commitment to building local evaluation capacity?
I think that anyone who is a traditional Indigenous person has a sacred commitment to help build capacity, and we try to do that wherever we can, and sometimes without much sleep or with little or no pay. I don't think outside of Indian country or outside of what you're willing to give that there's much, you know, especially if you look at it comparatively speaking, the ways that we invest for evaluation in other areas, whether it's developmental evaluation, data viz, quantitative evaluation, and all the money that gets poured into experimental and quasi-experimental studies. So I definitely do not think that it is. I think it's considered an add-on at best. And, you know, from, like I said, 20-some years being in the game and working with federal and state agencies and the mainstream contractors that get all this money, it's an add-on. Here's $500, will you be on this advisory committee, even though it's a $5 million or $10 million project. So I'm just saying it's a very, very small, it's a very small commitment. It's not equitable or just, I wouldn't say, and quite often, you know, folks will ask for things for free or for very little cost, something that they would never ask their mainstream counterparts. They would never have that same expectation. So I don't think that I don't think the resources are there. I think they're getting better in different places, nonprofits mostly, but it's definitely not in the public sector at all. Very little.
Well, that sums up the interview, so I just want to thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.